morning to everybody. I want to thank, first of all, Leah and Shaya Safin for sponsoring this Dvar Torah, Parshat Eikev. It's the Ilu Nishnap Yosef ben Zayvil, Leah's father, that Bezat Hashem, he should have Aliyah Began Eden, amongst other things, in the schut of the Dvar Torah, the Divrei Torah, which are now being learned. The whole about the book of Dvarim, as we know, is a preparation for the Jewish people coming into Eretz Yisrael, as well as Moshe Rabbeinu exhorting the people the whole time to engage in Yirat Shamayim and Musar. And in Perek Yud, Pasuk Yud Bet, we found a very difficult matter that Torah says, what does God request and require of you? That all Hashem wants is that we should have the awe of Him. And then the pasuk proceeds, to go in all His ways, that we should love Him, that we should serve Him, with all our hearts and souls, and lishmor mitzvot Hashem v'chokotav, and to keep the mitzvot of Hashem and His statutes. So already the Gemara, there's a great difficulty with the wording of this pasuk, because it makes out that what Hashem asks from us is something which is really minor. It's only that Hashem wants us to have awe of Him, and yet the pasuk proceeds to make all sorts of other demands that besides having fear and awe of Hashem, the Torah says that Hashem wants us to also love Him, that Hashem expects us to serve Him with all our heart and with all our souls. So first of all, it starts off with the word ki'im, which means only, and yet it proceeds to ask things which are much, much more. And how can you say, in fact, that there is, that Yirat Shamayim, etc., something which is a matter which is so small? So there's a very fascinating Amek Davar, which I think has got not only answers these difficulties, but I think it's got special relevance to the Jewish people when they are in Eretz Yisrael, where there's a collective and there's a whole community, and each one is working in order to build up Am Yisrael in its land. And this insight of the Netziv in Amek Davar helps us to understand our obligations more so in Eretz Yisrael. So the Netziv says something very radical. He says that, in fact, he says that the Jewish people are made up of various categories, various groups. And that's why I said beforehand that I find this so significant in the context of us being in Eretz Yisrael, where there's more sense of community on the macro level, the nationalistic level. But to get back now to the point, Amek Davar says that there are four types of people, four categories. The first group is the leaders. The second group is Talmidei Chachamim. The third group is the laymen, the professionals, who build up Eretz Yisrael, and then and Am Yisrael, and then there are the miners and the servants, etc. And he says that, in fact, what Hashem doesn't expect that all four categories should fulfill all these four demands or requests. He says, in fact, he uses a language, and I'll read it out to you. It's a very interesting, powerful language. He says, Kim'at she'asur lekat hashniya. What Hashem demands from one group is almost a prohibition that it should apply to a second group. This is a very radical statement. Now, when we see what exactly he says, we'll see that it makes very much sense. And he says like this: for example, the leaders, when Hashem, the Hashem addresses the leaders, he says that what are expected from them is that they should focus on Yirat Shamayim. They should focus on the fear of heaven, on God's or omnipotence, on God's being all aware of his being powerful. And why so? Because since that the leaders are exactly that, They should know that they can't abuse their leadership, but there is that they should know there's an authority above an authority. They should know that that God is watching over them and they're going to be held accountable. So therefore, they have to be focused on the aspect of God's omnipotence and of his yirah, of fearing him, of having a sense of awe of that great authority. If they would go to the next request in the pasuk, which is to love Hashem and to serve him, etc., so then that preoccupation with, let's say, learning to a great degree, by focusing and meditating on the love of Hashem and the greatness of Hashem, that would interfere, in fact, in their running of the country. So therefore, they can't, over here, there's a limit how much they can learn, how much they can, as I say, go into isolation and dwell on the greatness of Hashem. That's not for them. They can't, as I said, they can't function in that way. That's what he means, I think, when he says kim'at, right? She'asur lekat hashniya. It becomes almost as a prohibition for them to delve into learning too much. So that's concerning the first category. Concerning the second category, it says that Hashem requests that what they do is that they focus on the love of Hashem. The language of the pasuk is lalechet b'chol drachav u'la'ava oto, to go in his ways and to love him. So that's, of course, the Talmidei Chachamim who are centered and focused on learning the whole time. So the demands from them is that they don't stop for a minute in their diligence of learning in Torah, and that brings them to the love of Hashem. They're not the leaders, so to speak, in the classical way of the first group. They are leaders by example. They are leaders in that that emanates from them a sense of inspiration, but they're not leading in the nitty-gritty like it is like the kings, etc. So therefore, they've got the time, and they've also got the demand that they busy themselves day and night. They really toil with Torah the whole time. In fact, there's a story that about the Netziv that once he was co-Rosh Hashiva with Raphael Mivoloshin and Rav Mibrisk, and it was about 2:00 in the morning, and the Amek Davar the Netziv had a problem, and he went over to the house of Reb Chaim to ask him what does he think of a certain matter. And Reb Chaim had gone to sleep. He had a knock at the door. He was alarmed. Who could be at this time, 2:00, and he sees the Netziv? Anyway, the end of the whole matter was that Netziv said to him, listen, you're like a Rosh Hashiva. You can't go to bed at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. You're required to till 2 o'clock in the morning at least to toil. That's very much fits in with what he says. And then there's the third group, the people, the professionals, the people who have got all sorts of vocations, the engineers, the doctors, the architects, the farmers, etc. All these various people. What does Hashem want from them? So the pasuk says, "Lishmoret mitzvot Hashem v'chokotav asher anochi metzavecha hayom letov lach." Those people, Hashem requires that they are impeccable in their dealings with their fellow man. That the word lishmor means to guard fastidiously and properly, right? All the words of Hashem, because since that the business environment, the environment of working is such that one has to be very careful of theft and of ona'ah, and so many a gamut of isurim as they expressed in the laws of Chosh and Mishpat. So therefore, Mimela, the emphasis is on the shmirah, the guarding of the practical mitzvot and the halacha, that in no way is there any breaking of these laws, because in the interaction of man and man, there is bound to be countless pitfalls, countless issues and challenges, and that's why the emphasis is on the lishmor. So to get back to summarize then, we started off with a question which the Gemara and others explained, that when Moshe Rabbeinu addresses the people, he says, all Hashem wants from you is Yirat Shamayim, and then he adds on a whole lot of other requests. And we said that this is what's left. And it's very, very difficult for a person to have awe, to have the love of Hashem in a peak way, to keep everything diligently. And it's almost like impossible sometimes. And this is something that is very disheartening. And here the Netziv comes and says, you know what, it's not exactly that, but we divide up these demands and requests amongst the various peoples of the Jewish people, and such that the community as a whole becomes a community which is perfect, which reflects all the ideals of the Torah, and it's not placed. We don't have to feel this tremendous burden that all these demands are in the single individual. You should have all a Shabbat Shalom.